Daniel and Aisha seemed like the perfect couple. The proud husband devoted to tradition, and she, the elegant bride who appeared flawless in every way. But on their wedding night, a shocking discovery shattered the illusion of purity, igniting a storm of rage that turned celebration into bloodshed. What began as a dream marriage ended in unthinkable tragedy, leaving behind a story that would haunt their community forever. The town had not seen a celebration this grand in years. From early morning, the streets buzzed with excitement as neighbors gathered to witness the union of Daniel and Aisha. Lanterns glowed warmly across the courtyard. Music drifted through the air, and laughter echoed between the decorated walls. For the guests, it was more than a wedding. It was a spectacle of joy, a moment that brought together families and friends who had long awaited this day. Daniel, dressed in a tailored suit, stood tall, radiating pride. He had always been known as a hard-working and respectful man, someone who valued tradition and carried himself with dignity. Marrying Aisha was not just the fulfillment of a dream. It was proof that his patience and commitment had finally been rewarded. Aisha walked gracefully down the aisle, her gown shimmering under the lights, every step capturing the attention of those around her. To the crowd, she looked like perfection itself, a bride whose beauty seemed untouchable. For Daniel, her presence felt like a promise of everything he had ever desired: loyalty, purity, and devotion. The ceremony unfolded flawlessly, with vows exchanged and blessings given. Smiles painted the faces of relatives. Children clapped with delight, and the couple was showered with petals as they sealed their bond. As the evening deepened, the reception was filled with endless dancing, heartfelt speeches, and countless toasts to the future. Guests whispered about how perfectly matched the pair seemed, how this union would surely bring years of happiness. Every moment looked picture-perfect, leaving no hint of what was about to come. Beneath the glow of candles and the sound of music, no one imagined that the joy of this night would soon dissolve into silence, and that within hours, the town would wake to a story of unthinkable horror. To Daniel, Aisha appeared to be the embodiment of everything he had ever wished for in a wife. She carried herself with a quiet elegance, her voice calm and composed, her smile radiating warmth that charmed everyone she met. In the weeks leading up to their wedding, she had impressed his family with her manners and the way she treated elders with respect. Friends described her as graceful, refined, and perfectly suited for Daniel, a man known for his serious nature and strict values. To him, she was not just a partner. She was the crown jewel of his hard-earned reputation. Daniel had built his life around the belief that honor and tradition were the foundation of happiness. He imagined his bride as a woman untouched, pure in every sense, someone who would mirror his vision of morality. Aisha, in his eyes, seemed to fulfill that image completely. She was modest, careful with her words, and always presented herself in a way that reassured him of her innocence. When she lowered her gaze during family gatherings or spoke gently about the future, Daniel felt certain she was the perfect bride he had been waiting for. But beneath her composed exterior, Aisha carried a hidden past. There were chapters of her life she had carefully locked away, memories she refused to revisit, mistakes she never spoke of aloud. This marriage represented a chance to rewrite her story, to leave behind what once haunted her. She believed that if she played her role flawlessly, no one would ever question her history. For Aisha, the wedding was not just about love, it was about survival. Yet secrets have a way of surfacing, and the life she tried to build on silence was destined to unravel in a single night. The celebrations had finally quieted, and the newlyweds stepped away from the crowd into the privacy of their bridal suite. The room was decorated with flowers, soft candles, and satin sheets, all arranged to mark the beginning of a new life together. For Daniel, this was the moment he had long anticipated, a moment he believed would seal his trust in the woman he had chosen. Every detail seemed perfect, the music fading in the distance, the fragrance of roses filling the air, and the sense of closeness that only a wedding night could bring. But as the hours unfolded, Daniel's expectations began to unravel. What he discovered shattered his carefully built image of Aisha. His belief that she had entered this marriage untouched, pure in every way, collapsed instantly. Confusion gripped him first, a fog of disbelief that left him motionless. He tried to rationalize, to tell himself there was some mistake, but the reality before him allowed no escape. The confusion quickly shifted into a storm of emotions he could not control. Suspicion clawed at his mind, dragging with it an anger he had never experienced before. He felt betrayed, humiliated, and dishonored, as though the very foundation of his marriage had been built on lies. In his upbringing, purity was not a preference, but a sacred promise, and he now believed that promise had been broken. Aisha, sensing his unease, wanted to explain, but her silence only deepened his rage. To Daniel, the truth was already written, and no words could erase it. In that single night, the dreams he carried for years dissolved, replaced by a chilling certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The joy of the wedding turned to dread, and love gave way to fury. Daniel's thoughts spiraled in every direction, each darker than the last. The man who had entered marriage with pride and anticipation now sat in stunned silence, replaying the moment again and again in his mind. The image of Aisha as the perfect bride shattered like glass, leaving only fragments of doubt and anger behind. Every value he had been taught since childhood seemed violated, and the honor he had guarded so fiercely now felt mocked. To him, this was more than disappointment. It was humiliation. His sense of betrayal grew heavier with every passing minute. He pictured how his family would react if they ever discovered what he had just learned. The whispers of the community, the shameful stares, and the quiet judgments haunted him before they even happened. His pride, once unshakable, now stood on the edge of collapse. He felt as though everyone had deceived him, even fate itself. Aisha, unaware of the magnitude of his inner storm, tried to reach him with calmness, but her efforts were met with cold indifference. In Daniel's eyes, her presence had transformed from cherished bride to living proof of dishonor. Each movement she made, each glance she offered, only fueled the fire inside him. He could no longer see the woman he married, only the secrets he believed she had hidden. The walls of the room seemed to close in as silence stretched longer and longer. Rage simmered quietly within him, growing hotter with every heartbeat. What was meant to be a night of closeness had become a battlefield of emotions. Daniel's sense of control began to erode, and in the depths of his fury, he started to imagine that only drastic action could restore the honor he believed was lost. The night pressed down heavily, the silence in the room broken only by the faint flicker of candles. What should have been a sanctuary of love felt instead like a cage where Daniel's rage prowled restlessly. His thoughts circled endlessly, each one darker than the last. He could not escape the image of his new wife as a deceiver, and with every moment he convinced himself further that he had been trapped in a lie. What had once been joy now curdled into bitterness, and the man who had walked proudly into his wedding was replaced by someone consumed with anger. He felt stripped of his dignity, robbed of the honor he had worked so hard to preserve. To him, this was not a private disappointment, but a stain that threatened his very name. The fear of being exposed, the shame of whispers spreading through the community, filled him with suffocating dread. That dread twisted itself into fury, a fire that grew hotter the more he imagined others mocking him behind closed doors. Aisha sat quietly, unaware of the violent storm within him, believing the silence might soften the tension. But Daniel's mind twisted her calm into indifference, her stillness into proof of guilt. Every detail of the room, the wedding decorations, the clothes they wore, the very bed they sat upon, felt to him like cruel reminders of betrayal. In the shadows of that night, his thoughts turned sinister. He began to see only one way forward, one way to cleanse what he believed had been ruined. Each breath tightened his chest, each heartbeat pounded louder with rage. The love that once defined him was gone, replaced by a chilling conviction that vengeance was the only answer left. The silence of the bridal suite was suddenly broken by a surge of violence that erupted without warning. Daniel, lost to the storm of his own fury, let his rage consume every ounce of reason he once held. The gentle glow of candles, meant to symbolize warmth and intimacy, now illuminated a scene of horror. The petals scattered across the bed, once symbols of love, became stained reminders of the irreversible act he had committed. In those moments, the dream of marriage, the promises made before family and friends, all dissolved into a single act of destruction. Aisha's life was cut short before it had truly begun. The woman who had walked into the room with hope in her eyes was silenced forever. She had carried secrets, mistakes, and regrets, but none of them had warranted the fate that awaited her that night. In the stillness that followed, Daniel stood frozen, staring at what his hands had done. The weight of his actions pressed down upon him, yet the fury that had driven him moments earlier now gave way to a chilling emptiness. The bridal suite, once filled with symbols of celebration, had become a chamber of tragedy. Outside, the world remained unaware. The guests had gone home, still smiling from the evening's joy, never suspecting that within those walls, happiness had turned to horror. Inside, only silence remained, a silence so deep it seemed to echo. Daniel's heart pounded as the realization began to sink in. There was no undoing what had just happened. The woman he had promised to cherish lay lifeless, and the life he had dreamed of was gone in an instant. What began as a night of union ended in irreversible bloodshed, forever sealing their story in darkness. Morning crept slowly into the house, bringing with it the brightness of a new day that sharply contrasted the darkness of the night before. Family members expected to see the couple emerge, smiling and ready to greet their relatives, but the door to the bridal suite remained closed. At first, whispers were soft and patient, excusing the delay as the natural shyness of a new bride and groom. But as hours passed, curiosity turned to unease. Knocks echoed through the corridor, followed by worried voices calling their names. No answer came. Eventually, the door was forced open, and what lay inside froze every heart in the room. The decorations from the night before still lingered, the flowers, the candles, the satin sheets, but they were now overshadowed by a scene of horror. Aisha lay lifeless, her beauty extinguished, while Daniel sat in the corner, pale and hollow-eyed, staring into emptiness as though trapped inside his own mind. The joyful wedding had transformed overnight into a crime scene. Panic spread through the household. Screams rang out as relatives rushed to comprehend the unimaginable. The shock rippled beyond the family, spilling into the community as neighbors gathered outside, murmuring in disbelief. Police were called immediately, their sirens breaking the fragile silence as they arrived to secure the scene. Daniel offered no resistance. He neither wept nor argued, only sat still as officers took him into custody. His silence spoke louder than words, confessing to what had been done without the need for explanation. What had begun as a celebration now ended in devastation, leaving families broken and a community reeling. The wedding that once promised unity would now be remembered only for its chilling aftermath, a tragedy no one could erase. The courtroom was filled with a heavy silence as Daniel's case unfolded before the public eye. What had once been a private tragedy now became a story dissected by lawyers, journalists, and strangers alike. The details of the night spread rapidly, sparking fierce debates about honor, betrayal, and the dangerous weight of rigid traditions. For some, Daniel was a monster who had destroyed an innocent life. For others, his actions, though unforgivable, reflected the pressures of a culture obsessed with purity and reputation. During the trial, Daniel showed little emotion. He admitted to the act, offering no elaborate defense, no attempt to shift the blame. His confession was plain, his words stripped of remorse or justification. The judge, unmoved by his silence, pronounced a life sentence, condemning him to spend his remaining years behind prison walls. The gavel's final strike sealed his fate, leaving him with nothing but time to reflect on the irreversible choices of that night. Aisha's absence was felt far beyond the courtroom. Her family mourned not only the loss of their daughter, but also the cruelty of the way her life ended. The community, once buzzing with joy at her wedding, now carried the shadow of her death. What had begun as a union meant to unite two families instead tore them apart, leaving scars that would last for generations. In the cold silence of his prison cell, Daniel replayed the night endlessly, haunted by the memory of what he had destroyed. The love, the trust, and the life he believed he was building, all gone in an instant of rage. The story of their wedding would remain not as a tale of happiness, but as a warning of how obsession and pride can turn celebration into ruin.